Welcome to Collect TV. We're joined today by artist Keegan Hall. Keegan, welcome. I'm Kevin Jackson. Keegan's hyper-realistic drawings and style and what he can do with the pencil are absolutely amazing. In fact, they're so good that a lot of people can't believe his drawings are the work of a man with a pencil. But Keegan, thank you for joining us, and want to visit a little bit today about your work.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me here. I'm excited to get this going here.
All right. So take us back. You're a kid growing up in the small town of Sumner, Washington, which I'm familiar with here in Washington State. And tell us a little bit about your relationship to art starting out as a child.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, starting from the very beginning, growing up in a small town, my parents didn't have a lot of money. So, we grew up in a trailer park in Sumner. And to make things a little bit more challenging, I have one sibling. Her name's Joanna, and she has cerebral palsy. So definitely a unique childhood, kind of growing up, not only in, the small town with some of those extra challenges, but just kind of trying to find myself and where I fit in, being kind of a fan of art and sports and a lot of different things that I think most people don't have all in one, or at least a lot of people that I came across didn't have a lot of the same interests. But yeah, as a kid, I drew a lot, spent a lot of time kind of by myself, looking for things to do. And art was a big component of that. Actually, collecting sports cards was a huge component of that as well. And so kind of marrying those two things up with some of my other loves were business, although I didn't really know it back then, but I would go to card shows and kind of buy, sell, trade cards and comics at, the South Hill Mall in Puyallup when they would have card shows, or, the Auburn Super Mall, or, just some of these other places, just to kind of, enjoy the hobby and play around with some of these things that I enjoyed.
I'm sure a lot of our users relate to that background. They probably can't relate to what happened next for you, though. So you end up at the University of Washington. You're chosen as one of the youngest artists to go to a special program in Italy. You dreamed of becoming an animator at Disney, but then you left art after that, right? So tell us a little bit about kind of what happened there, and your decision upon graduation to maybe not pursue art post grad.
Yeah, I think getting a degree in art, depending on which direction you want to go, it can be difficult to kind of monetize, that degree within that industry, right? So, and I had a lot of people telling me that coming out of school, right? I was graduating, I have debt now that I took out student loans, and the prospects of a job within the art world, weren't immense. And then you kind of add on the fact that you have a lot of people telling art's not a real career, you're not that good anyways, so just try to avoid the headaches and get a quote real job. And fortunately for me, I had other interests in addition to art, that being sports. I grew up playing basketball. I still play basketball 3 times a week, so love sports, and of course love my Seattle Sonics. So once I finished University of Washington, I actually joined the Seattle Sonics as kind of a sales and marketing person, and spent 5 years with the team. So that was like a whole nother new world that I got exposed to, and just a ton of amazing experiences over those 5 years.
Well, you were there when the team ended up relocating to Oklahoma City in 2008, right? Had a chance to go down there, but chose to stay here in the Northwest. What was that whole period like? I imagine that was really chaotic, and I grew up a Sonics fan, so really emotional for a lot of us in the Northwest. What was that like being on the inside of that?
Yeah, it was very strange, I can tell you that. I mean, just from once the team was, well, the team was for sale, and you had Howard Schultz coming in and kind of talking to the staff here and there about, what's happening, and then ultimately selling to Clay Bennett, and you had Clay Bennett coming in, literally looking me in the eye saying, we're not moving the team anywhere. And kind of those, so I mean, just a ton of kind of confusion, but you felt okay, but there's still uncertainty. And I even remember going to the NBA All-Star game in Las Vegas that year, and there's a whole another crazy story about how I ended up at this Elton John show, which is ridiculous. But it ends up being a private show for the NBA. So it's
Mhm.
like all NBA superstars, legends, and I saw David Stern was there. And this is before the concert started. I went up and introduced myself, Keegan with the Sonics. And he's like, "Oh, don't worry, you guys are fine. The team's not moving anywhere. You're good, you're good." I was like, "Oh," I felt wonderful
Oh, wow.
um, at that moment. And of course, we know what happened next. So, I kind of, you know, ultimately probably could have moved with the team, but that wasn't really a destination that I wanted to be. So ultimately decided to go back to school actually and to pursue my MBA. So I went back to University of Washington, going for business. Again, I'm in business mode, sales, marketing. This is my career, and I'm trying to go as far as I can.
Yeah, and so then you kind of segue off into a little bit of the tech world and some startups. You do some work with Live Nation, where you're probably getting your concerts and music around that. So you did that brief detour, but then you decided to come back to art. You had a kind of big event in your life that brought you back to art. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, you mentioned the startup. So I coming out of grad school, I did join a startup. We raised about $4 million, built out this company, and ended up getting acquired. And I thought things were going really well until I got that dreaded call one day that my mom wasn't feeling very well. She had battled cancer a couple years earlier. Went through chemo, radiation, and obviously that's just a brutal process for anybody to go through. And was cancer free. Now we got the news that it came back worse than ever. And so she was just starting to kind of prepare for this next battle. And again, got that call on a Friday that she wasn't feeling well. She went in on a Saturday just to get checked out from the doctors and actually passed away on Sunday.
Wow.
And it just, yeah, it happened so fast that it was almost like hard to even react, where my head was just spinning. And um, the months following that, I kind of spent a lot of time soul searching and what I wanted to do with my life, how I wanted to spend my time, kind of the impact I want to make. And also just thinking about the memories I had with her as a kid and how art was such a key component of
Mm.
my childhood. And at this time I hadn't drawn anything in over 10 years. I mean, art was
Wow.
so far off my radar. It was
Hmm.
I was never looking back, right? But for some reason, like something was just pulling me to sit down to draw. And I did, and I drew a picture of Michael Jordan. Ironically, it was my first drawing back. And I remember I posted that on social media, just, trying to find something to post on like Facebook or something. And a lot of people were like, "Wow, I didn't even know you could draw." And somebody had asked me to do a drawing of Cam Chancellor, the Seahawks. This is when we're going to the Super Bowl every year, seemingly. And I did that, and Cam saw that drawing online and asked me to do a piece for him, and then things kind of started to rapidly take shape from there.
Hmm. So tell us a little bit about your process. How do you pick the right image? How long does it take you to do a drawing? I read that you did a photo of Michael Jordan's a drawing of Michael Jordan's dunk from the '87 dunk contest. I read that took you like 300 hours, and the detail you're getting of people in the crowd. But when you pick something that you're going to draw, what draws you to it? How do you pick the image that you're going to go after, and then what is your whole process there from inception to the end?
Yeah, and that's a big question depending on how I want to answer it, because I'm such a big sports fan that sports was like the natural subject matter that I gravitated towards once I
Mhm.
started to get back into art, because I get a lot of people saying, "Hey, have you thought about drawing something else or do this or that?" And it's like, I mean, maybe, but I just love sports and I love trying to capture the dynamic poses, and I can appreciate the talent being, having played for so long myself. And the nostalgia component, there's just so many aspects of sports which just draw me in continually. When it comes to, the images themselves, I mean, I just like, what would I want to own? What's something that I would want to draw and own and put on my wall? And kind of an interesting side note is, as I get back into art, I feel like I was learning to draw all over again. So it's, if you actually look back at my really early stuff when I just got back into drawing, I mean, I can't stand it because I think they're terrible, because I can see the growth. as I'm kind of figuring this out again.
Uh-huh.
Um, but that's also been a fun area to explore, not only learning again, but also trying to create artwork and images that continually challenge me. So,
Mhm.
you mentioned that Michael Jordan one. That was like a whole nother level where um, if you actually watch the time lapse of that Jordan dunk one,
Mhm.
uh, the first like the first, I don't know, a couple minutes of the drawing, you can see that my original plan was to blur out the background. I was a
Mhm.
little bit too scared to take on all those people and all those spaces. I
Sure.
didn't think I
Yeah.
could do it.
And they're
So
tiny. Yeah.
yeah, tiny faces.
Yeah.
And again, my paper is not big. That's the other thing that's often overlooked in hyperrealism, is that if you see hyperrealistic drawings, they're huge. They're like, the size of a wall, and you just have and it's like one face the
Mhm.
size of a wall. So you have so much room to really pack in details. So when you see it on your computer monitor or your phone, it looks like a photograph because it's been shrunken so much. So the fact that I do these much smaller pieces with a high level of detail, it's so much more difficult. But that Jordan one, again, you can see that I started off blurring the background, and then I kind of got I was like, man, if I'm gonna spend all this time creating this drawing, I might as well just go for it and see if I can do
Mhm.
it. And I watch in the video, I go back through that area, start adding faces, and then kind of the rest is history from there. So yeah, again, that one took well over 300 hours. Um, I've gone, I'm going to take on another challenge like that, which will probably take, 5, 6, 7 months for a single drawing to do. But that's definitely not the norm because it's so mentally taxing to spend that much time on a single piece, capturing that much detail. So I have to like take a break every once in a while and kind of reset with smaller pieces.
Mhm. You mentioned the time lapse videos, which I would encourage everyone to go to Keegan's site and check them out. They're pretty amazing. Do you do that to, like, some people have questioned, like, is he really doing all this with the pencil? Do you do that to kind of show your work, or to take people into your process, or what's the reason for those time lapse videos?
Yeah, all of the above, to be honest. One thing that I love to do, and if anybody, sees my social media, I like to share updates every day as I progress through a drawing. So you see it come together from that early ugly sketch of a handful of lines all the way to that final, hopefully photorealistic drawing. And yeah, you get to kind of come along as I create these things. And then the time lapse video is kind of like that full recap celebration of the artwork. But as you noted, I had a lot of people questioning if these were even drawings.
Mhm.
And that Michael Jordan one specifically, and I'm so glad the Jordan one was the first time that I had filmed from, like, I don't even know, like 4 or 5 different camera angles as I was drawing. I didn't really think much of it because it was just like another drawing I was going to do. But once I finished it and I posted that, and that drawing went absolutely bananas online, like crazy viral all over the place, and no one believed it was real. And because I mean, people were convinced it was just a photo filter of some kind. And thankfully, I had all that footage that I had
Mhm.
captured of the entire drawing process. Otherwise, yeah, I would be like arguing with people still about the validity of the drawing.
Mhm. One of your early pieces I wanted to ask you about, Keegan, is I know you did a drawing of Mariners pitcher Felix Hernandez, and you got that over to Felix, and there was kind of an interesting backstory of he had lost some stuff in a fire at his home. Can you tell us a little bit about that piece?
Yeah, I mean, it turned out we have a mutual friend, Felix and I. So it kind of after that fire had happened, and that friend reached out, and he's basically wanted to commission a piece, and for Felix, and was going to give it to him personally. So um, that was actually one of the first time lapses that I ever did. So like half the footage got ruined because I didn't even know what I was doing. I started filming it. It's all so yeah, I mean, like, you learn as you go along. So yeah, he delivered that one. I made prints. So Felix signed a print for me that I still have in my studio here. So yeah, I
Uh-huh.
mean, being a big Mariners fan, and him being like our greatest pitcher, that was a kind of a pretty special piece. And that was early on in my career, so it's kind of starting to build um, these opportunities of working with different athletes and celebrities kind of as I go along.
Yeah. Well, they say to never meet your heroes, but I think you've defied that cliche in a lot of different ways. Keegan, tell us about fan of Seattle sports. A big rock and roll fan. What are your favorite collaborations when you look back at your kind of vast portfolio? And I know for any fan of sports in the Northwest, your archives just look like a who's who of the athletes that have come through Seattle, certainly.
Yeah, it's still crazy for me to even look back and reflect on some of the people that I've worked with and projects that I've got to be a part of. And we didn't really mention it, but charity and giving back has always been a key component of my artwork, and through that I've been able to work with a lot of these people. But in terms of some of my favorite projects, obviously, getting a call from Michael Jordan was kind of a big deal. Growing up being a big fan, watching those Sonics Bulls battles, and getting a chance to, he flew me out to his golf course when I, gave him the piece. He flew my whole family out, actually. Just awesome guy. Got to spend time with him, and so that was incredible. And then, from a music standpoint, I grew up on Pearl Jam. Eddie Vedder, he was like high on my list from the beginning. So getting a chance to work with him, spending time with him and his family at his house, at his studio, is just what it was like dreaming, right? Hearing all the songs, all the lyrics, and then him kind of taking me through. He has a crazy collection of music memorabilia and sports memorabilia, by the way. Being a big Chicago fan, he's got some crazy Bulls stuff and Bears, and just magical. So those are my probably my top two. And more recently, working with Giannis Antetokounmpo. This was a new one for me because we actually, obviously he's from Greece, and we did a whole project in Greece. So we flew to Athens, was a part of this big project. So that was a pretty unique one as well.
You mentioned the charity work. I want to talk to you a little bit about that with the Keegan 200. I know your work has helped give hundreds of thousands of dollars to various charities. Why don't you tell us a little bit just about how that's worked? Some of the athletes and musicians that you've worked with on the Keegan 200 to get those donation numbers up.
Yeah, I mean, it really came out of some my childhood experience. Growing up poor, and with a disabled sister, and we gave back a lot when we could. Like my mom was a Special Olympics coach for like swimming, and I volunteered. I was a basketball coach, and so we were always a part of charitable components. But I think once I first got back into drawing, again, I still had my day job back then, and I was thinking, okay, drawing, if I could, I don't need, I have a full-time job with income, so I don't need the money. I don't need to survive off my artwork. So it'd be cool to figure out a way to use my art to give back. And it all kind of started out of the blue, where I just saw Richard Sherman throw up a tweet about his upcoming charity softball game, and I replied and I was like, hey, I have this idea. I don't know if you'd want to do it, but I'd love to tell you about it and just see. And he said, yeah, send me a DM. And basically the idea was, I want to create a drawing. I want to get 200 limited edition prints created of the drawing, and then me and the athlete, or Richard and I, would both sign them and sell them for 200. So it was 200 for 200, raise 40 grand, and then donate 100% of the money to charity. And much to my surprise, Richard right away was like, yeah, that's awesome, let's do it. And I still remember that very first one. We announced it on a Monday. The on sale date was that Friday, so it kind of went, I guess, viral that whole week. So by the time Friday rolled around, it sold out instantly. 40 grand at charity, and that was the first one of many to come. And now we're approaching, I don't even know, like $800,000 that have raised and donated to all kinds of charities and organizations across the board. So it's been a pretty cool to see this thing grow and continue to grow and help a lot of people along the way.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. So, at what point did it become a full-time job for you, Keegan? You mentioned you were doing both, a day job and your art on the side. When did it cross over, and that this is, you were an artist full-time? Define anybody who told you in college that was never going to happen.
Yeah, and in fact, if you look at my social media, that's kind of why I have this little one-liner that says, doing what they said I couldn't, right? Because that's such a defining thing in my life and a motivator. Because what was happening is as my art was slowly getting traction, I would work all day and then spend a few hours with my family for dinner, and that night I would go back from 8 p.m. to like midnight, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning drawing. So it was like these two full-time jobs I was trying to balance, and ultimately like there was kind of a point where you got to decide, you want to go all in or not, because it wasn't going to probably happen if I was straddling. And ultimately, I took the plunge and went for it, not knowing if this thing could actually be a full-time job or supporting the family in any way. And I've just been grateful that it has worked out the way it has.
Well, one moment that I'm sure brought you really full circle was, I know last year you did a collaboration with Michael Penix as part of a Seisman campaign at the University of Washington. There was a game, I can't remember if it was an Oregon game or which one it was, where your prints were handed out to all the fans that were going in. What was that collaboration like, and what was really an incredible season for UW? We won't talk about the very last game of the year, but incredible season for Washington, and you were right there with Michael Penix, and you're right back at that school and seeing all those fans walk in and being handed a Keegan Hall drawing on the way in. What did that feel like?
It was crazy. I mean, I'm the biggest UW Husky fan, obviously, having graduated twice there and go to all the games. I have, in fact, this little image that you see behind me, when Kalen DeBoer got hired, I guess 2 years ago, that was my first ever project, and we did that drawing of Dubs, and this is a picture of me and my family down on the field during the game, and it was just awesome to have that whole sold out stadium, and you're in the middle of the field, getting applause. It was just absolutely bananas. So then the next year, which was, as you mentioned, this past year, we had a great record. We're going into the season, with a pretty darn good team and a Heisman contender and Mike Penix. And, I wanted to really not only, do another project that featured Michael, but see if we can do a charity component too. And the crazy thing, as you mentioned, it was that Oregon game, which was the biggest game of the year. The two of the best teams in the country. It came down to a field goal to win the game. So to do the prints in the beginning, I did like an autograph signing, which the line was freaking down around the concourse, which was so cool to be back, at UW and have that kind of support. The Huskies win. We had college game day there. So like Joel McHale, he did our whole game day, ESPN game day. And so after the game, he and I were running around the stadium, like, just chaos. So it was just such an amazing, memorable experience, just from my art to the game, pregame, postgame, the whole thing. And then of course, having that go all the way through the season, the Mike Penix product sold out. So that was another 40 grand we donated to Mary's Place, which is an awesome organization. And I got to, really go along with the team. Um, I went to the Sugar Bowl and then the national championship, and of course the Pac-12 championship before that. So being at all of those games and just being a part of it, for me, it's like I felt like I was part of the team, like I was winning along with them after being so involved with them along the way. So it was just such a magical year.
You've done a lot of work with athletes. You've done a lot of work with rock stars. What do you prefer? Do you prefer to draw an athlete? You prefer to draw a rock star? What makes kind of the ideal piece of work for you, or is it a moment? When you're thinking about what makes your ideal drawing.
Yeah, I mean, they're both so different. I mean, because I love music and love sports, and those each of those do something different for me. With the athletes, I can really feel that moment of the competition and the strength and the triumph. But the music, like if you ever obviously gone to concerts, you know what it's like to be there, the crowd singing. So if I can capture that moment of just, I mean, they're so different. I will say one thing that I found unique is that, with a lot of athletes, your target customer is largely restricted geographically, right? So like, Gary Payton is, basically like a god in Seattle, but maybe somebody in New York probably isn't going to buy that print. Whereas with musicians, I mean, Pearl Jam, they're massive worldwide. And
Hmm.
when we when we launched that project, it sold out instantly. It crashed my website, within seconds, really, the whole thing was sold out and gone. It was just like, so that was my first experience with kind of the music world, thinking, whoa, this is like a different animal because music transcends borders, countries, all of that. So that was kind of an interesting dynamic to observe.
Yeah, as a Pearl Jam fan, I can tell you to get anything signed by Eddie Vedder is not that easy, and then to know that it was going to charity and that he was involved in that, I think, kind of made it a must buy for everybody in the Pearl Jam community. That's for sure.
Well, his wife Jill is awesome. She was kind of telling us early on that we should price him a lot higher, and
Hmm.
I'd always kept my stuff really low for a couple of reasons. One, I want to make all of my prices for prints accessible to anybody, right?
Hmm.
So not these crazy high prices for a print. And second, I wanted to just make sure it sells out, So, but she's like, no, 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 like we're gonna have plenty of buyers, and I was like, ah. And so we ended up pricing it like half of what she said, and then of course she was spot on because it sold out instantly. So hopefully we'll do it again and maybe price it more appropriately.
Yeah. So your work is truly collectible. I've bought several of your pieces myself. So do how does it feel to be creating something that's collectible that people are clamoring to own? And B, are there Keegan Hall completionists who like have to own every single piece that you do, and you can tell from your website are buying every single Keegan Hall print?
There are actually, which is really cool to
Uh-huh.
see. I get, emails or people will post on social media all the time. They have, like walls in their houses, like I mean a man cave or wherever that is, just a whole bunch of my artwork,
Hmm.
which is I remember when I first started and I was like, oh, I wonder if people would want to print. And I built a website and I had one single print on there. And it just felt so silly because I had this like website, e-commerce store with one item, one print, and then kind of to see it grow over time and to see people, it still is such a cool feeling to see anybody have it up on in their whether it's their office or like in your background. It's like it's still like surreal for me to even see that. And I'm always been so appreciative to people who have supported me in that, and just trying to return the favor by creating artwork that people want to own, while also doing good for the communities. And so far, it's been working out.
Hmm. Last question for you. What do you collect? You mentioned, a kid growing up, getting baseball cards. I'm assuming probably in the '90s. What do you collect? We see a couple signed jerseys there behind you. So what are you hanging on to?
Yeah, what's funny is that I had a decent card collection for like a little kid back in the day,
Yeah.
and I ended up trading all when I was a kid. I traded all of my cards, basically all my good ones, for a Michael Jordan rookie.
Oh,
And
wow. Okay.
and back then I think it was like $200, and it was
Uh-huh.
like everything I had to do it. And I basically had no more collection, but I had this one really cool card that I loved, and I still have it. Still have a
Mm-hmm.
Jordan rookie. I haven't gotten it graded, but I know it's a really high grade because it's been untouched. But
Okay.
I've always been too afraid to like mail it in and like, oh crap, like so.
Well,
So I
we
still
should
have
we
that.
should talk we should talk offline. The experts at Collect could probably talk you through the grading process, and you may be sitting on a six-figure card there. So that's
I hope
that's
so. Yeah,
that may have
it's
been
pretty cool.
most stories that start with I traded all my cards when I was a little kid end in heartbreak. This one I think may have ended up, I don't know what you had, but it might have ended up pretty good for you, Keegan.
Yeah, I hope so because
Yeah.
yeah, I've still got it. So that and then comic books. I have a pretty big comic book collection,
Uh-huh.
because as a kid, I would buy them not to read them, but just to draw from them and kind of learn how to draw that way. So I got a bunch of comic books that I recently looked up the values of all these old comic books. And I have a bunch of signed ones from the artists. So that's there. And then once I started doing all these different collaborations with athletes and musicians, that's almost been like a requirement for me. Is like, okay, if we're gonna do a project together, I need you to like personalize a jersey for me.
Hmm.
So now I have, I mean, you can kind of, I don't know if you can see over my shoulder, I got my GP one here and my Michael Jordan one over here
Sure.
that are signed to me. And now it's like almost overwhelming. All these framed jerseys are everywhere that I can't even put them up anymore. Um, and then I got like some pics out of Eddie Vedder's studio. I always love just like super unique thing. Like Eddie actually signed, wrote me like this really nice note on his ukulele, how to play all the songs on his ukulele album.
Uh-huh.
So I just like love really unique things that, they may or may not be valuable, but they're just kind of unique, and kind of like special to me. So yeah, I'm a big collector in all kinds of things.
Well, trading cards, comic books, signed jerseys, one of ones from Eddie Vedder. You are absolutely a man after Collect's heart, Keegan. So thank you for joining us today. Really, really enjoyed this time. And we're big fans of your work and especially the charitable stuff you're doing. It's amazing. So thanks again for your time. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Kevin. I
Yeah.
look forward to watching your guys' business grow here.